A coffee company in South Korea built an entire marketing campaign around a tumbler giveaway called Tank Day and scheduled it for the anniversary of a massacre where the army actually used tanks on civilians. Lambert Woollingham here, and this is the Daily Shear for Wednesday, August 5th. I have been going through the numbers all morning, and a fair number of them refuse to add up cleanly. Closer to home, the county and the city are both discovering that a public comment period can stretch a lot further than anyone on staff planned for. The Austin City Council voted 8-3 to send a $295 million bond package to the November ballot, overriding its own financial staff, who wanted to wait until 2028. Of that total, $260 million goes to parks and recreation, split between $65 million for aquatics and another $65 million for building repairs, with $35 million set aside for libraries. The owner of a $495,000 home would pay roughly $40 more a year in property taxes if voters approve it. Mayor Kirk Watson and council members Mark Jushin and Jose Velasquez voted no, citing last fall's defeat of the city's tax rate election as proof residents have reached their limit. The council takes a final procedural vote Thursday to lock in the election. Hemp retailers have gone back to federal court over the state's reinstated ban on consumable tetrahydrocannabinol products, the one that took effect July 31st by reclassifying Delta-8 and similar compounds as Schedule 1 substances. Companies including Hometown Hero and Lifted Liquids are suing the Texas Department of State Health Services and Attorney General Ken Paxton, arguing the rule contradicts both the 2018 federal farm bill and the 2019 state law that legalized low-THC hemp products in the first place. Retailers who keep selling now risk state jail felony charges and losing their business licenses outright. The industry had operated under a court injunction for nearly 5 years before the Texas Supreme Court dissolved it in May on procedural grounds, which is the sort of technicality that turns a legal product into a felony overnight. The plaintiffs are seeking an emergency restraining order to stop enforcement before it goes any further. The American Association of University Professors and 4 faculty members have sued the Texas A&M University system over rules that bar professors from teaching on race, gender, and sexuality without the president's personal sign-off. The policy prohibits those topics from core courses entirely and requires advance approval for anywhere else they might come up. Represented by the American Civil Liberties Union of Texas and the Yetta Coleman firm, the plaintiffs argue why this violates the First Amendment rights of the people actually doing the teaching. The lawsuit follows a professor's firing after a student secretly recorded a confrontation over a gender identity lesson, a controversy substantial enough that it pushed system president Mark A. Welsh III to resign. The plaintiffs are asking a federal judge in Houston to strike the policy down as unconstitutional. Tarrant County Judge Tim O'Hare had deputies clear the commissioner's court meeting room after the crowd disrupted a vote on eliminating 140 Election Day polling locations ahead of the midterms. About 120 residents had signed up to speak, and the room emptied after the one commenter compared the county's election policies to Russia. Deputies arrested 2 attendees, including former State Representative Lon Burnham, after they grabbed the microphone and argued with O'Hare over how comments would be handled. Once order was restored, the remaining speakers were let back in one at a time to deliver their remarks, each capped at 1 minute. The commissioners ultimately tabled the polling measure, conceding that the reduced number of sites would not have handled turnout anyway. The Austin City Council opened final budget debates on a $6.6 billion spending plan while trying to close a $26 million shortfall, and the current draft raises police funding by $25 million while cutting $5.3 million from social service programs. Non-profits have warned the city that the cuts would gut the local safety net. 5 council members introduced an amendment to restore $4.7 million of that funding using new revenue from the latest certified property tax rolls. Mayor Watson has told the full council to file all remaining amendments so staff can price each one out before the vote. Final budget votes are expected next week. Turning to the money pages, where quarterly earnings season keeps producing numbers too large to be reassuring on their own. SpaceX posted its first earnings report as a public company, showing $7.8 billion in revenue and a $541 million net loss, smaller than analysts had braced for. Starlink revenue jumped 66%, as its subscriber base doubled to 12 million, but the stock still dropped 9% in after-hours trading, once investors got to the spending line. SpaceX spent $18.3 billion in the quarter, more than 6 times what it spent a year earlier, most of it funneled into AI infrastructure and data centers. The AI division itself brought in $2.6 billion from compute deals with Google and Anthropic, but still lost $1.5 billion for the quarter. Chief Financial Officer Brett Johnson told investors the spending rate is not slowing down before the year ends. Paramount Skydance Chief Executive David Ellison published a guest essay defending his company's $111 billion acquisition of Warner Brothers Discovery, insisting the combined company would control less than 20% of American television watch time. He pledged $30 billion a year toward 30 theatrical films and 170 television series, which is a specific number of promises for a merger that has not been approved yet. 12 state attorneys general and 2 branches of the Writers Guild of America have sued to block the deal, arguing it would eliminate jobs and competition. A federal judge has scheduled the antitrust trial for March of 2027, meaning Ellison will be making this same case in court eventually. South Korean police raided Starbucks national headquarters over a marketing campaign called Tank Day, a Tumblr promotion launched by license holder Shinsegai Group on the anniversary of the 1980 Gwangju uprising, when the Chun Doo-hwan dictatorship sent tanks against pro-democracy protesters and killed hundreds of civilians. Civic groups filed a criminal defamation complaint demanding an investigation. Shinsegai pulled the promotion, fired its chief executive, and closed every store nationwide for a half day of mandatory history lessons for staff. An internal investigation concluded the marketing team had not intended to connect the campaign to the massacre, while separately acknowledging that sales cratered nationally anyway. AMD reported $6.7 billion in data center revenue, up 107% from a year earlier, powered by corporate demand for AI computing. Chief Executive Lisa Su told investors she expects that segment to double again in 2027. The consumer side told a different story, with gaming revenue down 31% to $779 million as parts shortages and retail price hikes hit sales of the PlayStation 5, Xbox Series X, and Steam Deck. The same company is simultaneously promising unlimited AI growth and explaining why it cannot keep game consoles in stock. Electronic Arts is officially private after a $55 billion buyout led by Saudi Arabia's public investment fund, Silver Lake, and Affinity Partners, the largest leveraged buyout on record. The sovereign wealth fund now owns 93.4% of the publisher behind Battlefield, Mass Effect, and EAFC. The deal was built on $20 billion in debt financing from JP Morgan, all of which now sits on EA's own balance sheet rather than the buyer's. Analysts expect the new owners to lean hard into cost-cutting and established franchises over new ones. It closes out EA's multi-decade run as a public company in one signature. Beyond the ledger, primary season delivered results overnight, and the Secret Service delivered an arrest report. Missouri's Secretary of State, Denny Hoskins, rejected a citizen petition that had gathered hundreds of thousands of signatures seeking a referendum on the state's newly redrawn, heavily Republican-favoring congressional map. Hoskins ruled that the state constitution simply does not allow congressional redistricting plans to be put to a public vote. That decision keeps the map off the November ballot entirely and leaves the Republican-drawn boundaries in place unless a court intervenes. The signatures, in other words, were collected for an option the Secretary of State says never existed. Progressive candidate Abdul El-Sayed won Michigan's Democratic Senate primary, narrowly defeating Representative Haley Stevens despite a $65 million outside spending campaign against him and Governor Gretchen Whitmer's endorsement of his opponent. El-Sayed ran on Medicare for All and opposition to United States military aid to Israel, with campaign stops from Senator Bernie Sanders and Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. He now faces Republican nominee Mike Rogers, a former congressman who ran unopposed with Donald Trump's backing. For the seat, retiring Senator Gary Peters is leaving open. The race is being watched nationally as a test of whether progressive primary wins in safe blue districts can hold up in an industrial swing state. Democratic Representative Marie Gluesenkamp-Perez advanced out of Washington's all-party primary in the 3rd Congressional District, fending off challenges from both her party's progressive wing and the conservative right in a district Donald Trump carried in 2024. She will face Republican State Senator John Braun in November. Both parties consider the seat one of the most competitive in the country as they fight over a narrow House majority. Democratic Representative Wesley Bell defeated former Congresswoman Cori Bush in a rematch for Missouri's 1st Congressional District, ending her attempt to reclaim the seat he took from her in 2024 with financial backing from the American Israel Public Affairs Committee. The race turned heavily on the war in the Middle East, with Bush campaigning against United States military assistance to Israel and accusing the country of genocide in Gaza. Bell's win secures the Democratic nomination in a heavily blue district, meaning the general election result is close to a formality. Federal agents and the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department arrested a 38-year-old man outside Trump National Golf Club in Rancho Palos Verdes after observing him photographing security preparations 2 days ahead of a scheduled presidential visit. Deputies found a handgun and a loaded 16-round magazine in his vehicle. He was taken into custody without incident and charged with weapons offenses. The Secret Service is now working with local authorities to determine whether the surveillance was tied to the visit at all. Somewhere in Riyadh, a spreadsheet now lists 93.4% ownership of Mass Effect, Battlefield, and EAFC, which strikes me as an oddly specific number to land on, as though the remaining 6.6% belonged to somebody who simply refused to sell. I keep picturing the negotiation over that final sliver. Some junior executive holding out for one more percentage point of a Saudi sovereign wealth fund stake in a space marine shooter. The fund already owns golf, soccer, and a fair share of Newcastle, so a video game publisher slots in as a rounding error with cutscenes. $20 billion of debt now lives on EA's own balance sheet, which means the next Mass Effect sequel is, functionally, financing its own acquisition. I do not know what percentage of my own nostalgia for that franchise the public investment fund now owns, but I would like it noted for the record that I never signed anything. Tarrant County led its residents back into the meeting room one at a time, 60 seconds each, to say what they had shown up to say about their own polling places closing. That is, democracy running on a kitchen timer, and nobody in that room seemed to find it strange enough to mention twice. That is the share for today, and I would like it on the record that none of it was my idea. Lambert here, off to go recalculate my own capital expenditures, which currently top out at 1 bag of hay. The day has been shorn. Until tomorrow.